20 minutes later, Karen found herself in the unprecedented position of having to explain to Dave why his well water was now the color of Mountain Dew, and her pool looked like a science experiment gone horribly wrong. You did wait? Dave's face was cycling through several shades of red that weren't found in nature. Behind him stood his wife Martha, recording everything on her phone with the dedication of a war correspondent. It was a simple water quality test. Karen improvised, desperately trying to think of a way to spin this. As HOO president, I have a responsibility to ensure all water sources in our community meet safety standards. By stealing my water, Dave's voice cracked on the last word. Borrowing, Karen corrected primly, even as she noticed Miguel quietly packing up his tools in the background. Traitor. And technically, mineral rights in this development are? Karen. Martha stepped forward, still filming. My husband's well connects to an old mining operation. It's been sealed for 40 years, but sometimes things shift. The words hung in the air like the sulfurous cloud now drifting across both their yards. Karen felt something cold settle in her stomach that had nothing to do with the morning's iced coffee. What kind of mining operation? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Copper, Martha said softly, and some other things they don't like to talk about anymore. Karen looked back at her pool, where the green was now trending toward an ominous black, and small bubbles were forming along the edges. She'd seen enough movies to know that bubbling toxic waste was never a good sign. We need to call the city, Dave said, pulling out his phone. No. Karen lunged forward, nearly slipping on the slick concrete. I mean, let's not involve the authorities just yet. I'm sure we can handle this internally. HOO to HOA. You poisoned my well and turned your pool into a Superfund site, Dave said flatly. This is way beyond HOA jurisdiction. But Karen's mind was racing. If the city got involved, there would be investigations, environmental assessments, possibly fines, definitely news coverage, and worse, much worse, there would be questions about her authority to authorize the water tap in the first place. Look, she said, switching to her most reasonable voice. What if I pay for your water to be tested and cleaned? Professional remediation, my expense. We keep this between neighbors. Dave and Martha exchanged glances. Karen could practically see them calculating the cost of a new well. What about your pool? Martha asked, gesturing at the now smoking water feature. Karen looked at her pride and joy, which was beginning to eat through the concrete deck around its edges. I'll handle the pool. Karen, Dave said slowly, I don't think you understand. If this contamination spreads to the groundwater, we're talking about the entire neighborhood, maybe the whole development. As if summoned by his words, Karen's phone began buzzing with text messages. First one, then 3, then a steady stream. She glanced at the screen and felt her knees go weak. Mrs. Henderson from 2 streets over. Karen, my garden sprinklers are spraying orange water. The Johnsons. Emergency HOA meeting needed. Our tap water smells like chemicals. And then, the message that made her break out in a cold sweat. This is Channel 7 News. We've received reports of environmental contamination in Willowbrook Estates. Please call us back immediately. Karen Whitmore stood ankle-deep in what could only be described as Satan's own smoothie, her white tennis shoes now a disturbing shade of chartreuse. The pool that had been crystal blue just 3 hours earlier now resembled the aftermath of a nuclear accident, complete with an oily film that created rainbow swirls across the surface. This is no tea supposed to happen. She shrieked at her contractor, Miguel, who was backing away slowly while holding his nose. The stench was indescribable, like rotten eggs having a fight with a skunk in a sulfur mine. It had all started so innocently. Well, not innocently exactly, but Karen preferred to think of it as creative problem-solving. Her neighbor Dave had been watering his prize-winning roses with the most gorgeous, mineral-rich well water, and Karen's competitive spirit simply couldn't stand it. Her own municipal water was fine for drinking, but her hydrangeas looked positively anemic compared to Dave's botanical paradise. Mrs. Whitmore, Miguel had warned her just yesterday, tapping into your neighbor's water line without permission, it's not. It's not illegal if it's for the betterment of the community, Karen had interrupted, waving her laminated HOA president badge like it was a magic wand. Section 4.2 of our bylaws clearly states that any action taken to maintain property values is within my purview as president. She'd made that section up on the spot, but Miguel didn't need to know that. The plan had been flawless. While Dave was at his accounting job, Karen would have Miguel accidentally nick Dave's water line during her pool maintenance, then install a discreet T-joint that would divert some of that precious well water to fill her swimming pool. By the time Dave noticed any pressure drop, Karen would already be hosting the annual HOA pool party in water so pristine it would make the country club jealous. The readings are off the charts, Senora, Miguel called out, frantically waving some kind of meter. This water, it's not safe. We need to call no one. Karen snapped, then immediately regretted opening her mouth as the toxic fumes made her gag. This is clearly just iron deposits, very high iron content. It'll settle. But even as she said it, she watched a fish, an actual fish, float belly up to the surface. Where had a fish even come from? And why did it have what looked like extra fins? Dave's screen door slammed in the distance. Karen's blood ran cold. He was home early. Karen? Dave's voice carried across the fence. Why does my water taste like pennies? And what's that smell? Karen stood frozen in her toxic puddle, realizing that her quest for the perfect pool party had just become something else entirely. Something that might require hazmat suits. The Channel 7 news van pulled up just as Karen was trying to shovel dirt over the worst of the pool spillage, a plan that was working about as well as expected, which is to say the dirt was now also glowing slightly. Mrs. Whitmore? The reporter was a sharp-looking woman in her 30s, with the kind of smile that suggested she ate HOA presidents for breakfast. I'm Jessica Martinez from Channel 7. We understand you're responsible for the contamination that's affected 17 homes in this neighborhood. Karen straightened up, still holding a shovel full of radioactive mud, and did what she did best, doubled down. I'm conducting a thorough investigation into potential water quality issues that may have been present in this development for years, she announced, projecting her voice toward the gathering crowd of neighbors. As your HOA president, I felt it was my duty to expose these hidden dangers. Jessica's eyebrow rose half an inch. Behind her, the cameraman was getting excellent footage of Karen's apocalyptic pool, which had now eaten completely through the concrete decking and was beginning to work on the wooden fence. So you're saying you deliberately tapped into your neighbor's well to expose contamination? Jessica asked. I'm saying that sometimes a leader has to make difficult decisions for the greater good, Karen replied, warming to her theme. Who knows how long our community has been sitting on this environmental time bomb? Dave stepped into the shot, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. She stole my water to fill her pool because she was jealous of my roses. That's a very reductive way to look at, Karen began. Ma'am, interrupted a new voice. Everyone turned to see a woman in a serious suit with an EPA badge. I'm Agent Sarah Chen with the Environmental Protection Agency. We need to evacuate this area immediately. The words hit Karen like a physical blow. Evacuate. The contamination appears to be spreading faster than we initially calculated, Agent Chen continued, consulting a tablet that was beeping ominously. We're registering dangerous levels of heavy metals and some compounds we haven't fully identified yet. But the HOO pool party is this weekend, Karen said weakly. Agent Chen stared at her. Ma'am, your pool is currently dissolving your patio. I don't think anyone will be swimming in it anytime soon. As if to punctuate her point, there was a loud cracking sound as another section of concrete gave way, sending a cascade of toxic water toward Karen's prized rose bushes. The plants, which had been the envy of the neighborhood just that morning, withered and turned black on contact. The irony, Dave muttered, is that my roses were doing fine with regular water. I only used the well water because Karen complained that my lawn was too green and it was showing up her landscape. Karen opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. For the first time in her 8-year tenure as HOA president, she was completely out of words. Jessica Martinez, meanwhile, was having the best day of her reporting career. So let me get this straight, she said to the camera. Hill President Karen Whitmore illegally tapped into her neighbor's well because his garden was too beautiful, accidentally unleashed what appears to be decades-old mining contamination, and has now forced the evacuation of an entire neighborhood. Allegedly, Karen croaked. Mrs. Whitmore, Agent Chen said, approaching with a clipboard and a very serious expression, "You're going to need to come with us. We have some questions about your decision-making process." As Karen was led away past her toxic pool and dying garden, past the news cameras and her furious neighbors, she couldn't help but think that this wasn't quite how she'd imagined her HOA presidency would end. But even as the EPA van doors closed behind her, Karen's mind was already working. There had to be a Bible somewhere that covered this situation. There had to be a way to turn this around, to make herself the victim instead of the villain. After all, she was still technically the HOA president. And nobody, not the EPA, not Channel 7 News, not even Dave and his mysteriously contaminated well, was going to take that away from her without a fight. The van pulled away from Willowbrook Estates, leaving behind a neighborhood that would never look at their HOA the same way again. And in the distance, Karen's pool continued to bubble and smoke, a toxic monument to the dangers of unchecked homeowner authority. But this wasn't over, not by a long shot.